Hello and welcome back to De-Stressing the Holidays, how to move from bah humbug to ho ho ho. This is Dr. Geri Puleo with Change Management Solutions, and today's lesson focuses on how not to let holiday stress turn you into a burned out Grinch. What we're going to be focusing on today is to help you identify the 5 warning signs of holiday stress. But we're going to be focusing not only on the signs once they occur, but we're also going to be identifying potential situations that cause these warning signs and early symptoms of holiday stress to appear in the first place. So let's get started. An elf asleep on a Christmas bulb. Does that sound like you? Not surprisingly, one of the first warning signs of holiday stress is absolute and total exhaustion. Now, what do you say when you're exhausted? A lot of times your self-talk or even the words and language that you verbalize to other can be really great tools to help you identify the potential warning signs of holiday stress. So not surprisingly, what you're usually saying when you're exhausted is, I'm too busy decorating and shopping and wrapping and cooking to even sleep. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Well, let's talk about the specific warning signs of exhaustion that result from too much decorating, shopping, wrapping, and cooking. All of these additional activities tend to break your normal routine. And when you have more activities loaded into an already overly scheduled day, it leads to going to bed later. But there's a problem. You're going to bed later and you're exhausted, but you can't seem to fall asleep. Or you fall asleep, but then you keep waking up, so you can't stay asleep. The other problem is that you also can't seem to take any time to rest at all uh, because you fall asleep during the day. Now, I know this all sounds kind of contradictory that you can't fall asleep and then you can't stay asleep, but if you take time out, then you do fall asleep. But this is very typical of the reaction that stress plays on your sleep habits and patterns. When you're exhausted, your body's adrenaline keeps pumping, and that usually keeps you up or wakes you up. But the other thing is your body also needs rest. So if you are in a location that's not your bed, like let's say that Barca lounger in your living room, it makes it a lot easier for you to fall asleep. I know it's weird, but we've all had that happen to us. So those are some of the warning signs. But none of us want to continue with the warning signs and lead up to holiday stress. So we start trying to cure ourselves. But a lot of the cures that we use are what are considered to be false cures. What are some of these false cures when you're exhausted? Working even harder. In other words, you keep on trying to add more and more to your already jam-packed schedule. And then you start rationalizing that you don't really need 7 or 8 hours of sleep. You can get by on 6. And then it keeps going down lower and lower and lower. And if you keep waking up during the night, you might be in bed for 7 hours, but your actual sleep might only be 2 or 3 hours. So it's no surprise that you continue to be exhausted. Another false cure is to deny that there are any declines in your productivity. You might be exhausted, but you think that you haven't made any errors, or so-called errors, in planning for the holidays. But then on Christmas morning, your children open up the gifts that are assigned to them, but then they open up the gift that you meant to give to somebody else. Well, that's a decline in your productivity, and it's not surprising because you are absolutely exhausted from all of this activity. The other thing that happens is, ironically, you begin to disregard or distrust the entire holiday season, oftentimes saying, I'll be glad when all this is over, and you begin to disregard or distrust the people around you who might be strongly encouraging you to take a nap and somebody else will do it. But when you're this exhausted, this is a sign of holiday stress that keeps you exhausted, and the cures that you're trying to take to overcome it end up really making you more fatigued. Hmm. Rudolph, who's angry? Well, I'm sure you can figure out what the second warning sign of holiday stress is: impatience and irritability. So, what do you think people say when the warning sign of holiday stress of impatience and irritability really starts setting in? Well, usually it's directed towards other people. Why can't you help me to make this holiday nice? You're very impatient with the people around you and you're awfully cranky. So, what are the warning signs? You start snapping at everybody: your family, your friends, your coworkers, your customers, even Santa. How many of you have been in a mall, which is innately stressful during the holiday seasons with all the people and the sounds and the lights and everything else, and someone says Merry Christmas or Happy Holidays, and you just give them a scowl? If you find yourself doing that, that is a key warning sign that you're beginning to experience the impatience and irritability associated with holiday stress. Now, this may start out with just a mild impatience. Well, I understand that it's going to be longer in these lines to check out because it's the holiday season. Well, you may feel that way in the beginning of November, but when December comes around, the same delays in shopping lines usually can make someone go ballistic. So again, it starts out with a mild annoyance and then it continues to increase in its intensity. And if you start saying, I just can't wait for these holidays to be over, you kind of want to get back to normal. You're just angry, you're exhausted, you're impatient, and the reality is you really don't have much of the holiday spirit. So what do you do to try to cure yourself of this? Well, these are some of the false cures, the cures that don't work. You start blaming your decreased productivity because someone else didn't do what they were supposed to do. But if you think about it, you're awfully cranky to be around. You're angry. You're not very happy. So you get even more angry because other people start avoiding you. Seriously, do you want to be around someone in the holidays that's nasty? So, but it's a false cure because instead of doing something to calm down and center so that you're not as impatient or irritable, you direct it outwards to the people around you. Another false cure is self-medication. And probably one of the most common ways of self-medicating during the holidays, particularly when you consider all the goodies that are around, is overindulging in whatever you consider to be a comfort food. For a lot of people, that's sugar. It's also higher fat. And some people also find comfort in increased alcohol consumption. But all of this undermines your ability to overcome your impatience and your irritability. What does this image say to you? One reindeer is creating a snow reindeer, but Santa Claus is creating a huge Santa Claus snowman, flexing his muscles. You might be surprised by this, but the third warning sign of holiday stress is a sense of omnipotence. So, what are you saying that might indicate that you have a sense of omnipotence that is contributing to your holiday stress? I don't need or want your help because only I can do the holiday traditions the way they're supposed to be. My goodness. So what are these warning signs with the sense of omnipotence? And what I found is a lot of people, both men and women, succumb to this. You're trying to make things nice. You're trying to retain the traditions, but you're trying to do it all yourself. And that just starts wearing you down and increasing your stress levels. So watch for these warning signs of omnipotence. you have too many activities that begin to lead to later bedtimes. This is very similar with the fatigue that goes on. But a lot of times when we're exhausted, we tend to overcompensate with a sense of omnipotence or being all powerful and saying that, denying the fact that we're exhausted. There's an internal conflict that you start experiencing. You have a desire for that perfect holiday, but it's confounded by the impossibility of the demands that you're putting on yourself. In other words, there's a strong sense of perfectionism that's in there. I think you might remember in the first video in lesson 1 that I mentioned my mother. And my mother wanted to do all of the baking a few days before the holidays and then do the entire huge Italian fish dinner on Christmas Eve. Now, one of the things that I didn't mention to you, that would be bad enough if she was a housewife, but my mother had a full-time job outside the home. But she didn't want anyone else to help. I can remember one situation where my cousin baked all of these cookies and she brought them over for Christmas dinner. My mother got very upset with her because she felt like the cookies weren't pretty enough and she wouldn't put them out. It caused a great deal of conflict within the family. My cousin felt dejected and very hurt, and she felt that my mother was looking down on her. At the time, I have to admit, I thought so too. But now I realize that my mother was probably totally stressed out with the holidays. She wasn't sleeping, yet she was trying to do everything perfectly. And you also have to remember that my mother was a working woman at a time when most other women were stay-at-home housewives and mothers. And there's nothing wrong with that, believe me. But it was her stress for that perfect holiday and her insistence that she do it all herself that really contributed to a very, very high sense of stress in her life. And what this reflects is the belief that you're stronger, you're more resilient, or you're more capable than anyone else. It's that only I can do this, nobody else can. So the false cures are trying to maintain those traditions. That's great. But the problem is you're not asking the people in your family or your friends who are involved with those traditions if they even want them anymore. Do they really enjoy them? And if not, why are you continuing to do them? But with a sense of omnipotence, you're remembering the way things were and you have this idealized vision of what things should be. And anybody who doesn't agree with your particular view of the holidays is someone that you tend to push away. You block their help. And while you may not want to admit it, when you have a sense of omnipotence as a warning sign of your holiday stress, you block other people from helping you in a way to boost your own ego. Santa Claus is doing his job, but yes, he's getting barked at by a dog. He's not too happy, is he? This represents the fourth warning sign of holiday stress, and that's feeling underappreciated. Now, what do you think you're saying if you're feeling underappreciated? Well, you might come right out and saying you don't appreciate it. So the belief is I'm working really hard trying to make this holiday nice for you, but you just don't even appreciate it. Now, that might be true, but many times, especially if you're deep into holiday stress, it's not true. It's just your perception of the situation. So here are the warning signs for you to watch out for. If you're experiencing a sense of bitterness or anger, stemming from the belief that your efforts and results aren't being rewarded by other people, you need to step back because that's a sure sign that you are beginning the downward descent into holiday stress. Also, if you're absolutely unable to enjoy the fruits of your labors. In other words, you spent all this time cooking, but you're too tired to even eat and enjoy the meal. You just keep going and working and working and working. And this leads to feeling like a servant rather than a member of the family. I found this a lot with the women in my own family, that they were so busy doing the cooking and the cleaning and the decorating and everything else that they never just stopped to sit down and enjoy the people for whom they were doing all of these things. So, what are some of the false cures to overcome this sense of feeling underappreciated? Well, working even harder. Even though you're exhausted and your energy is totally depleted, you keep on working harder, but you get even more angry because the additional hard work and effort that you're putting out aren't leading to the desired outcomes. In other words, you put all this time into having a wonderful dinner and nobody even said, "Hey, this was really great, thank you." It's amazing what a simple thank you or a recognition of somebody else's efforts would do to overcome these feelings of stress. Another false cure is, again, like feeling like a servant and just accepting the belief that your role is to work during the holidays and not to have fun. I'm going to give you a little insight. Even though traditionally you may have been the one to do all the work with the decorating and the cooking and the gift giving and the wrapping and everything else associated with the holidays, the people around you really want you to have a good time because they care about you. So if you believe that you're the martyr and that all you're supposed to do is work for everyone else and you're not going to have fun, this is a huge warning sign of feeling underappreciated and deep into holiday stress. And then the fifth and final warning sign of holiday sickness is holiday stress is sickness. And believe it or not, there is an actual physical malaise called leisure sickness. So let's talk about what leisure sickness is. Well, let's start with the planning. It's all those holiday preparations. All the responsibilities you have to prepare for the holidays increase your body's experience of stress, and it triggers the fight or flight mechanism. Now, when this happens, adrenaline is released into your body, and that's a good thing because that boosts your immune system. But simultaneously, your body is also releasing cortisol. And think about a fight or flight mechanism. You need something that is going to block pain. So cortisol is an anti-inflammatory that depresses the immune system. Even though the adrenaline is boosting it, it's being tempered by the cortisol, which is depressing the immune system. So because you're of these two chemicals surging through your body during the stressful time of the holidays, you're probably just going to keep on working, going forward, and you're going to ignore all the symptoms and the warning signs of any type of illness. And then the holidays occur, all of the holiday festivities, and your feeling is it's time to relax. Finally, social interactions, parties, being with families and friends. But there's a problem. Now that your body is not recognizing a stressful situation and igniting the fight or flight mechanism, all these chemicals start being no longer released. So your body stops releasing the adrenaline. And remember, that was what boosted your immune systems. And the adrenaline surge stops within milliseconds once your body says, okay, I'm no longer in a stressful situation. But the problem is the cortisol. Your body also stops releasing the cortisol. Remember, that's what depresses your immune system. But it takes a period of 5 to 10 minutes for that to happen. So the adrenaline's out of your body really, really quickly, but then there's this time delay where the cortisol was no longer surging through your body. And that is when leisure sickness kicks in. Anytime you have cortisol surging through your body without the adrenaline to buffer or balance it, your body becomes much more susceptible to disease. And think about it, the holidays are usually focused on being around a lot of people, people you know and love, as well as people that you might just be passing by during shopping sprees or anything like that. Also, the leisure sickness will kick in because you're going at a calmer pace. So it's a little bit easier for you to recognize the symptoms and the warning signs of any potential illness. Usually the leisure sickness kicks in within the first few days after you stop that frenetic pace. And I think we've all experienced it. We may not really have categorized it as leisure sickness, but a lot of times during the holidays you finally relax and you've been pushing since October, so you end up falling asleep. So you're not even present to be with your family and friends. So who is most susceptible to leisure sickness arising as a part of holiday stress? Well, the workaholics, because as we mentioned before, they just keep going and going and going and going and going and going, not sleeping, not eating, engaging in false cures. And also the perfectionists who do the exact same thing. They have a very high standard and they don't want any help. Now, this sounds kind of depressing, right? But not everybody necessarily succumbs to leisure sickness or admits to it. In different studies, it's been shown that only about 3.6% of men and only about 2.7% of women have admitted to feeling ill right when the holidays start, and the stress of preparing for the holidays is diminished. So, what do you think you're saying when you have leisure sickness? Watch for a phrase like, well, I finally got everything done for the holidays, and now I'm sick. It's a miserable feeling. So, what are the warning signs? Feeling sick or under the weather as soon as you stop that frenetic holiday preparation place. And it's usually the sickness or illness is induced by stress, or continued stress will prolong that particular illness, particularly if the holiday stress has deteriorated into burnout. So, what kind of symptoms are usually found in leisure sickness? Headaches, tension or migraines might increase, overall body aches and pains, the cold, a cough or flu-like symptoms, gastrointestinal problems like nausea and vomiting, definitely not fun during the holidays. And it can also have acute fatigue or insomnia. You can't sleep or you sleep too much. And also, leisure sickness can manifest in more psychological or emotional illnesses, such as increased feelings of anxiety, depression, or the blues. So, what are the false cures for leisure sickness that most people use? Refusing to take the time to rest or slow down. Now, all of these 5 warning signs of holiday stress, the leisure sickness, impatience, irritability, exhaustion, a sense of omnipotence, feeling underappreciated, all of those are not just signs of holiday stress, but they can also be the signs of burnout. And in the next and final lesson in de-stressing the holidays, I'm going to be giving you some very proactive ideas and tips for you to finally overcome holiday stress so that you can move from bah humbug to ho ho ho. Coming up next, holiday survival tips, or how to move from bah humbug to ho ho ho.